Rating shipments is one of the most important jobs that a broker has to do on a daily basis. If you can't master rating shipments, you're not going to be able to get carriers to take your freight. You're not going to be able to get customers to give you freight, right? And the problem is that both customers and carriers look at rates in two different ways, right? Carriers are looking at it from the perspective of revenue, right? They're looking at rates to cover their costs, their operating costs, their maintenance, their workers, all of that stuff. Customers are looking at this as an expense. So they're looking at ways that they could cut the expenses. They're looking at their profit margins, right? So sometimes when you look at the rates from both customers and carriers, there can be a little bit of a confusion, right? So in this video, what we're gonna do is we're gonna cover everything that you need to know about reading rates, calculating rates, understanding how rates work from both the customer and the carrier perspective. And most importantly, we're gonna cover the 3 ways that smart brokers rate their shipments properly so that there's profit in it for you, your carriers are happy, and your customers are happy, all at the same time. So the biggest problem when it comes to naming shipments is that brokers make 2 big mistakes that can lead to pretty bad results. The first one of those being guessing at rates, right? So some brokers don't understand that rates are constantly changing. They don't understand that the rates are dictated by the carriers who are actually doing the work in the area that they're quoting. And then they wind up guessing. And what happens when brokers guess at rates is they usually guess either too high and they don't win the work, or too low and they can't find any carriers to take their freight. We want to avoid guessing wherever possible, and I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. But the second mistake that a lot of brokers make is using history that's a little bit too old in order to quote their shipments, right? Sometimes when brokers have been around for a while, they get used to a certain way of doing things, they get used to certain information, and as you see things over and over and over again, you develop these patterns, and it happens to everybody. What happens is, when you do something for a certain rate in the past, say 2-3 weeks ago, if you're not up to date on that rate at the present time, things can change very quickly, especially in today's market. At the time I'm shooting this video, there's a lot of things going on in the world. There's a lot of things happening with the driver shortage. A lot of outside influences are creating volatility in what happens with rates, right? So what happened last week, even 2 weeks ago, is not necessarily going to be the same this week, all right? So before we get into how smart brokers rate their shipments, I wanted to let you know about these 2 mistakes, and you want to avoid making those at all costs, right? So that's guessing at rates, and that's using history that's a little bit too old and outdated. And outdated can mean as old as 1 week, and sometimes even days, right? Something that's moving on a Friday might have a different rate than something that's moving on a Monday, right? We'll cover why in just a second. So let's get right into the 3 ways that smart brokers rate their shipments. All right, number 1 is going to be using shipping history, right? And we just said that if you use shipping history that's too old, that's a mistake that brokers make. But if you have a healthy database of shipping history, you can use that to accurately predict what is going on with rates. There's more to it than just seeing what the number was last week or 2 weeks ago. You have to look at the trend of similar lanes over time, right? So if we look at, say, something from the Northeast to the Midwest, if we look at that and we just take a snapshot in time and we say, okay, 2 weeks ago, this load was moving at $3 per mile. If we don't look at history even more than that, we have no context to measure that up against. So what we have to do is we have to take a large portion of data and look at the trend line of where a rate is going. Is it going up over time? Does it shift with seasonality? Is it higher in the winter but lower in the summer? All of these things have to be taken into account when you're using history to rate your shipments, right? We can't just look at it at one single spot in time and say, this is what it is last week, this is what it's gonna be today, right? That's no way to rate your shipments. And that is what will lead to that mistake that we talked about just a few minutes ago. Really quick, if you are enjoying this video and you are getting any value at all, what I want you to do is I want you to scroll on down to that little button right there, hit the subscribe button so that you never miss out on any freight broker mentor updates, tips, tactics. The last thing I want you to do is fall behind in the freight broker game. It's constantly moving, constantly changing. It's important that you stay on top of things if you ever want to develop your business, right? And while you're at it, give this video a like. It helps more people see it, gets the word out there, and eventually will help shape the industry for the better. So the number one thing that brokers use to rate their shipments is analyzing their history. Now, you may not be in that position where you have a lot of history, and that's perfectly fine. We can move on to number 2 on how you rate your shipments, which is going to be speaking with carriers directly. Even today, our brokerage has been around for about 24, 25 years. We still make it a habit to talk to carriers regularly about lanes, even lanes that we've been doing for so many years. Rates have been changing a lot lately. So the only way we can accurately quote our customers is by speaking with carriers. Before you say, oh, Lewis, that sounds like a lot of work. It is a lot of work, but let me explain why it will benefit you in the long run in more ways than one. When you're rating shipments for your customers, when you inaccurately quote a shipment and you can't deliver on that service, that causes a lot of bad will with your customers, right? If you're constantly giving rates and then at the last second you come in and you say, oh, I can't handle it for that rate, it's going up to here, or oh, I can't, it's not working out at that rate, carriers are asking for this. They're constantly going to be let down by you, and eventually they're not going to use you, they're gonna go to another broker who has the integrity to say, I can't cover that, to be honest, or my rate is going to be this, and it's astronomical, right? A customer would rather hear that than hear a rate that you're not gonna be able to fulfill. Right, so when you're talking with carriers, yes, you are doing extra work, but that extra work is going to result in a higher client satisfaction because you're not going to be the broker that's constantly dropping shipments at the last minute, right? And that is a very real thing, and it's a big trap that a lot of beginner brokers fall into. They will quote things without having trucks under them, and then at the end of the day, they're just upsetting their customers and making it harder for them to build their book of business. So that's going to be number 2. And just to give you some practical advice on how this is implemented, what we usually do is when we have a load opportunity, what we'll do is we'll do something called a ghost post. And what a ghost post is we'll post the load on the board and we'll do a truck search and see what trucks are in the area. We use DAT load board. That's the one that I recommend to all of my private clients, my groups, all that stuff. And what we do is we'll physically call carriers, let them know the load that we're working on, ask them what their rate would be. It doesn't take any more than 1 to 2 minutes, and it helps us build our carrier base in the process, right? Because as we're calling these carriers, we're writing down, okay, so-and-so Express is always in the Midwest. He likes loads to Louisiana. Joe at Landstar likes loads to here. And we're constantly building that database, right? And that's why we have less trouble covering stuff than maybe another broker because we're actively and constantly both adding to our carrier network and building up a database of what these rates look like constantly, right? And it's a system that you develop over time. I wouldn't expect you to do that right away. Now on to number 3. This is the absolute best way that you can ever quote a shipment for yourself, for your customers. And this sort of marries up the best of method number 1, which is going to be history, and method number 2, which is actively calling carriers, right? There is a shortcut, and I'm happy to share it with you. We're actually going to go right into my computer in just a second so I can show you how it works. But the way to do that is to use a rating tool, right? My favorite and the one that I recommend is with RateView by DAT. And what RateView does is it takes a collection of data from active carriers and active brokers that are physically moving loads. They're taking the data that the load was moved at, right? So if the load moves at 250 a mile, that data is going to be passed through into this rating tool. And what it does is it aggregates that data over thousands and thousands of carriers to give you an accurate forecast of what you should expect to pay. It's absolutely incredible. It saves us a ton of time, a ton of headaches, and a ton of conversations, to be honest. And let's just jump into my computer real quick. I'm gonna show you what that looks like. So right here, we are actually in my DAT RateView software. It comes with a subscription to Power, I believe. And as you can see here, I have here a load from Houston, Texas to Woodward, Oklahoma. We were working on this load, trying to find pricing for it. And if you go up here, you can see something called the broker to carrier spot, including fuel, which is 65 cents this week. It's obviously more than 65 cents, but that's just the surcharge, right? So that's estimating it's going to cost that much per a certain distance, and it's calculated into the rate. Okay, and it says here that I should expect to pay $3.17 on a spot quote. All right, so what I would do is I would take that data and I'd look a little bit more into it. Right, so here's what the data looks like over time. Looks like we have a little bit of variation there, but I could easily highlight over one of these dots and it'll tell me the high, low, and middle of the range. So if I were a broker, I'm looking at what that range looks like, and if I wanted to save some time, I would quote based off of that middle to high range, right? Because if we could find a carrier to do it at the lower range, then that's just going to be a little bit of additional profit in our pockets. Another thing to look at with rate view is there's another view down here called shipper to carrier contract rate. And now this is something that I don't really pay attention to because this is based off of rates that are going from shippers straight to carriers on dedicated contracts, which we're not really worried about right now because we're working in the spot market, right? So before we close up, I wanted to let you know that we spoke with the managers at DAT and we came up with an incredible partnership and a promotion exclusive to new DAT subscribers and fans of Freight Broker Mentor. If you sign up through one of our links below, you're gonna get 1 month completely complimentary. That's a savings of between $100 and $200 depending on which subscription you sign up with. Those links are gonna be posted right below, so if you check those out. Also, we do receive a small commission off of those links. So if we've helped you in any way, you could check them out, or you don't have to sign up through our link. It doesn't matter to me. But we only endorse products that we actually use actively in our broker. So I hope this video helps you rate your shipments over the next week. Use these strategies either by themselves or in combination, and you'll start to get into your own rhythm and habits of rating shipments effectively. It's a skill that you have to develop, just like cold calling, negotiating, all of those things, but this is one of the most important aspects of being a broker, so it's something that you really have to put some time in to focus and learn exactly what you're doing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, what I want you to do, make sure you like this video and subscribe. That'll keep you up to date on all things happening in the freight broker world. And one more thing I want you to do, if you are interested in this kind of stuff and you want a little bit more help, I want to personally invite you to join my Facebook community. It's a private community. It's called the Freight Broker Network, and it's where I hang out with all of my broker friends, where we talk shop, talk about networking with carriers, sales, rates, and industry trends that at a level that you don't really see anywhere else on the internet. So go ahead, click the Facebook link below, invite yourself in, I'll approve your request, and then you can join the conversation. Until the next video, I'll talk to you soon.